You're listening to The Hard Truth with John Deaton. John Deaton is a Marine veteran, lawyer, and best-selling author who stared down poverty, survived street violence, and beat cancer to fight another day. From the streets to the courtroom, Deaton has taken on corporate greed and fought against government fraud and overreach. Always for the little guy, a proud father of 3 girls, Deaton brings you the raw, unfiltered truth that hits hard and holds nothing back. Join us as we dive into his journey, his vision, and what he hopes to bring to the people of Massachusetts.
Don't you dare touch that dial or change the channel because it's Sunday on iHeart's WRKO. 680 a.m. You are locked into The Hard Truth with John Deaton. Good evening, everyone. I am John Deaton, and it has been a big week. President Trump had a big week. We had the Karen Reed verdict last week. This week, we got the Sean P. Diddy Combs verdict. So let's start with that. Remember, you can reach out to the show at john@hardtruthshow.com. That's john@hardtruthshow.com. As you know, I read your emails, your comments, your criticisms. So feel free to be candid with me, and I'll address some of those comments on the air live. Now listen, so Sean Diddy Combs' verdict comes out after this long, expensive trial. And what is the verdict? He is guilty of simple prostitution. He was found not guilty of conspiracy and racketeering and force and all that. Basically, he went across lines to engage in prostitution. So the big news for Diddy is that he's not going to spend a decade of his life in prison behind bars. Will he get some jail time? He could get time served based on those kind of charges. Are they felonies? Yes. But it's basically prostitution charges. So I would be very surprised if he got more than 18 months. The one thing that I'm curious about the Sean P. Diddy Combs trial, however, is we heard about a lot of videotapes, and the jury was played videotapes in the trial of him, smacking his girlfriend around, and there were charges that there was violence involved in the sexual acts with sex slaves, if you will, basically male prostitutes that Diddy hired, and they would act forcefully against women that Diddy wanted to watch, including his fiance. But we kept hearing about all those videos of other celebrities, whether it's Justin Bieber or J-Lo or all the people that went to these Diddy parties. I mean, LeBron James was at these Diddy parties. Leonardo DiCaprio went to these Diddy parties. I mean, there's pictures of Barack Obama with Sean P. Diddy Combs, Oprah Winfrey, you name it, and he has a picture with some of the most powerful people in the world. So we kept hearing about, videotapes. We heard theories that he was blackmailing people. He's blackmailing them because he had a video. What's that sound like? A lot like the Jeffrey Epstien situation. And which brings me to that. I'm still waiting. You're still waiting for the Epstein files. Where are they? Donald Trump promised that he would release the Epstein files. Kash Patel, the director of the FBI, guaranteed that he would release those Epstein files. Pam Bondi, the Attorney General of the United States, said, we're going to release those Epstein files. She said publicly there are thousands of hours of tapes, videotapes with Epstein and people engaged in sex acts, including with minors. Where is all that stuff? Listen, they don't need all this time to just redact the victims' names. Hell, victims have come forward and sued J.P. Morgan and other banks for financing the Epstein Island. And so some of these victims have become public. So here's the question, and I want you to respond and write into the show and tell me what you think. Will we ever see the Epstein documents? Will Donald Trump Cash Patel, Pam Bondi, Dan Bongino, and all these people who guaranteed that we would see these records. Will we see them? Or is this just another example of someone getting into office and pushing everything under the carpet because they're protecting politicians, they're protecting celebrities, they're protecting donors? What's going on? I want to hear what you have to say, because I got to tell you something. I looked Elizabeth Warren in the face when I debated her, and I said, shame on her, because J.P. Morgan Chase financed that entire operation of Epstien Island, and J.P. Morgan executives were participating in these activities on the island. There's emails of J.P. Morgan executives talking about the Snow White experience, the Beauty and the Beast experience. Yet Elizabeth Warren didn't ask the CEO of J.P. Morgan Chase one question about all of that. She wanted to talk about crypto and Bitcoin. Okay, and so are we ever going to see those Epstein files? I hope so. Which brings me to crypto. And so here's our crypto corner, if you will, segment, because there was big news that came out. A Genius Act, that's what it's called, the Genius Act, passed the Senate, and it's getting passed by the House. And we expect one of the major points of legislation of the Trump presidency, one of the first major legislative acts that he signs into law, will be this Genius Act. And what it does is that it makes stable coins a part of our financial infrastructure in America. Now, a lot of people out there are confused what a stable coin is. Just know this. Let me explain it to you, because it's very important, and I think it's going to be why I'm so bullish on cryptocurrencies, why I'm so bullish on Bitcoin, why I have 80% of my net worth in Bitcoin and other digital assets. Now, when you go to the bank, a lot of people don't realize this. It's called fractional banking system. When you put in $10,000 into the bank keeps 10% on deposit, and then they use the other 90% to do business. They give commercial loans, they give mortgages to people. They use your money to do business. And in the olden days, you would get interest for your money. Remember that I'm old enough to remember you could get 4 or 5% at the bank for holding your money in there. And in the last, 25 years, we've got nothing. In fact, there was a time when they almost charged you to put your money in the bank. But the reality is, the banks don't hold all your money. If you put $1 million in the bank, go try a week later to go in and say, give me my $1 million. It's not going to happen. If you put $50,000 into the bank tomorrow, and a week later you go and say, I want $50,000 in cash, they're going to look at you like, well, wait a minute. Well, why do you need so much money? They'll start asking you questions, and it drives me insane. Don't ask me why I want the money. It's my money. Give me my money. I want it back. Well, it doesn't work that way. They hold only a fraction. That's why it's called fractional banking. They hold a fraction, about 10% of the assets in the bank, and then they loan out 90%. So when banks make bad loans, remember the great financial crisis? When all of the homes were going into foreclosure, people couldn't pay their mortgages because they kept doing those credit default swaps and all that stuff. Well, the banks made all these terrible loans, and then people started defaulting on those loans, and then the bank starts becoming less and less credit worthy, and then people get word of that, and then they rush to take their money out of the bank. And when everybody rushes at the same time to take their money out of the bank, that's called a bank run. And a bank can't give everybody all of their money. If every single customer at TD Bank walked in tomorrow and said, give me all my money, that I've deposited, it can't be done. They won't be able to do it. So that's what a bank run is. And we've had bank failures. And when banks fail, people don't get their money. All right. Now there's FDIC insurance up to $250,000 per account. But if you have $1 million in one bank, if you're a business and you have $1 million in one bank, you're not going to be able to take your money out, and it's not insured. If that bank goes bankrupt, you're out $750,000 unless the government steps in. And the government has several times in my lifetime stepped in to save the banks. Well, a stable coin is a digital form of a dollar, but the bank must have what's called 100% reserves. So if you buy $100 in stable coins, each stable coin is worth $1. The bank must keep that $100 in cash, or they must own U.S. Treasuries or some other assets. It's 100% backed. So if there was ever a bank run and every customer wanted their money all at once, the bank would be able to comply because they have 100% in reserves. Stable coins are just digital dollars. And the Senate, people like Elizabeth Warren, they didn't want the stable coin legislation passed, right? And the reason they didn't want it passed is basically about from their Trump derangement syndrome. Well, Donald Trump's family is into crypto now. 8% of Donald Trump's worth is into crypto, and that's a conflict. And so we're going to shut it all down because we don't want Donald Trump, to be involved. But it got passed. It's going to help the United States because all of these are in U.S. dollars. So there are U.S. dollar-based stable coins, and most stable coin issuers will buy U.S. Treasuries to reserve the stable coins to back it up, which means people will buy our debt. It is a great thing. It's a good thing to happen. I was for it. If I was in the Senate, unlike Ed Markey and Elizabeth Warren, I would have supported it because it's good for America. It's going to help our debt crisis. When we come back, I'm going to talk about the big, beautiful bill. Welcome back to the show. You're listening to The Hard Truth. I'm John Deaton, and it's on iHeart's WRKO 680 AM. Everybody, listen, before the break, I was talking about the stablecoin legislation, the Genius Act, and why it's a good thing and why it's going to drive demand for U.S. debt. We need to do something about our debt. So driving demand for that is a good thing because it'll allow us to refinance our debt as we move forward. And it's a big deal for crypto and Bitcoin. Let me just remind you, I'm going to say something. This show is not financial advice, right? So you can't come and sue me because I'm recommending something. You do what's in your best interest. But I will tell you this. Today, it is more riskier to have zero exposure to Bitcoin than it is to have some exposure. I believe that if you go to your financial advisor, I want you to do this for me. Take this test. Call up your financial advisor and say to him or her, look, I'm thinking about putting 1 to 5% of my net worth in Bitcoin. What do you think? If that financial advisor says it's a Ponzi scheme, it's only used for criminals and cartel, blah, 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 fire him or her immediately. Okay, those kind of perceptions are from 2013. That's all rhetoric. That's nonsense. Okay, the United States of America has now what's called a strategic Bitcoin reserve. Just like we own gold. The United States owns gold. It's located in Fort Knox. And we own about $1 trillion worth of gold at Fort Knox. That is an asset that the United States owns. Well, the United States now owns 200,000 Bitcoin, which is worth billions. And the United States, through an executive order by President Trump, has said that he wants his Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, and his Commerce Secretary, Howard Lutnick, to acquire more Bitcoin. They just can't do it in a way that's going to cost taxpayers any kind of money. He said you got to acquire Bitcoin, and it must be done in a budget neutral way. And let me tell you something, there are so many ways to be budget neutral. You could sell some of the gold we own, right? You could sell $10 billion worth of gold and then buy $10 billion worth of Bitcoin. It equals the same. There's no increase to the taxpayer. It's budget neutral. You could issue debt with Bitcoin bonds and do it that way. You could authorize that federal income taxes could be paid in Bitcoin, and we're going to put a fraction of 1% of the tax revenue into the Bitcoin Strategic Reserve. Okay? And so that's the United States. There are other countries who are acquiring Bitcoin. You have countries who are mining Bitcoin. Now, Bitcoin, when I first started this show, and actually I'll back up. When I ran for U.S. Senate, I'll share this with you. I told my campaign, I said, listen, guys, gals, Bitcoin and crypto is going to be a big deal. And they laughed at me. They thought I was some crypto geek that didn't know what he's talking about. Here's a guy, he's never run for office in his life. And he comes in and says, yeah, you know, this Bitcoin's going to be a big deal. And when I ran, I said, listen, I told the campaign, we have to be able to accept Bitcoin and XRP and other cryptocurrencies as a donation into my campaign. I won't run unless we can do that, right? And so we did that. Well, guess who else did it? Donald Trump did it. Kamala Harris did it. And I was one of the first people to basically accept crypto. I'm very proud of that. And so it did become a big deal. In fact, the crypto industry basically was the largest campaign donation industry in the 2024 election by far. $200 million. The crypto super PAC called Fair Shake donated to people, both Republican and Democrats, that were pro-crypto. President Trump went to the Bitcoin conference in 2024 and said that he was going to make Bitcoin, he was going to make America the Bitcoin and crypto capital of the world. So if your financial advisor is ignoring all of that and saying, I think Bitcoin's a Ponzi, I think Bitcoin is, it's too speculative as an asset, it doesn't have any intrinsic value. If you hear nonsense, bullshit, like that, I almost said it, then fire that person. And I can tell you right now that when I started this show, I think Bitcoin was like right around 100,000. Today, it's 109,000. By the end of this year, I'm going to make a prediction. We're going to come back to it and see if I'm accurate. By the end of this year, I predict that Bitcoin will be $180,000. It's just shy of 110 now, so 70,000 more. I have zero doubt in my mind that Bitcoin is going to $1 million. It's not going to $1 million in 6 months. So my position is you don't have to be like me. Listen, I'm an aggressive guy. I'm kind of an all-in, all-out guy. When the first iPhone came out, I made the best decision of my life financially. I sold everything I owned in stocks and properties, and I bought Apple. And Charles Schwab actually called me and said, hey, you shouldn't do that. You shouldn't put all your eggs in one basket. And I told Charles Schwab, hey, it's my money. I'll do whatever I want. If I lose it, I lose it. Because I knew that this iPhone in 2007, the mobile internet that you could do on your phone, not just the email, but the internet, I knew it was going to revolutionize communication in the world. And so I bought all Apple stock. I got it in at like $66 a share, and I rode it to $680 a share. And I was able to buy my house for over $1 million in cash by selling some of my Apple stock. And so that's who I am. So I'm all in on this asset class. 80% of my net worth was in Bitcoin when I ran for U.S. Senate. And today it's probably about 70% because XRP has done really well. It's done well, better than Bitcoin. And so I probably have 20% of my net worth in XRP. So I'll come back and eat my words if I'm wrong. So my position is that any person out there, even if you don't understand what Bitcoin is, do the research, do the work, okay? Go down the rabbit hole, read the Bitcoin white paper, watch some YouTube channels, do your research. But what I tell people, friends, and I've been telling this for 5 years, then just put 1% of your net worth in Bitcoin. If you lose it, if I'm wrong and Bitcoin becomes worthless, you're still got 99% of your net worth. You don't want to lose that 1%, but if you do, it doesn't change your life. It doesn't negatively impact you for the rest of your life. So I say that you're almost foolish today if you don't have 1 to 5% of your investment portfolio, your net income, your net worth in Bitcoin. There are other cryptocurrencies like XRP that I'm in. Do your research. I believe in certain other cryptos, but Bitcoin is certainly the one where I would recommend to people because I'm convinced that it's going to go significantly higher. Now, don't buy it if you're going to absolutely sit there and watch it. I had a friend who bought Bitcoin. I convinced her to buy Bitcoin at $10,000. And she bought a whole Bitcoin, right? She took $10,000 of her life savings. She had about $50,000 in her life savings. And she took $10,000, which was 20% of her life savings, and she bought a Bitcoin at $10,000. Bitcoin went down to $7,000. I bought more and she sold. She couldn't take it. She got convinced and paranoid that it was going to go from 10,000 to zero. And so she took a loss at a $3,000 loss. And I told her, I said, listen, I warned her before, if you're going to, become paranoid about it, if you're going to watch the fluctuations and the volatility and be upset, and it's going to cause you anxiety because you lost some money on paper, then don't do it. It's not worth it. Your mental health, your physical health, it's not worth it. But she didn't listen. She bought the Bitcoin. It went down 30%. She sold it at $7,000. I bought more. And today it's $110,000 almost. And so had she kept it, her $10,000 investment would be $110,000 today. She could then take out her $10,000 original investment, and she would have $100,000 of house money. That's how you build wealth. And let me just tell you guys out there that just earning a paycheck, even if it's a good paycheck, and paying your bills and then putting whatever you have in the bank in cash is not building wealth. They're printing so much money. We're about to talk about the big, beautiful bill, and just know that it's another $2 trillion deficit per year. We're at $37 trillion of a national deficit. They're just going to print money. The more money they print, the less valuable each one of those dollars are. So people are looking for alternative assets to invest in, and the single best asset that you can invest in is Bitcoin, in my opinion. All right, that's it. We'll come back, and we're going to talk about that big, beautiful bill. You're listening to The Hard Truth with John Deaton. All right, welcome back to the show. You listen to The Hard Truth. I'm John Deaton. You can reach me at john@hardtruthshow.com. That's john@hardtruthshow.com. All right, people. In the Senate right now, it just passed the one big, beautiful bill as President Trump has described it. And I know I'm not going to surprise some of you. but I'm here to tell you it is big, but it's not so beautiful. And some of you will say, there's that rhino Deaton again, who isn't a fan of the big, beautiful bill because he's not a huge supporter of President Trump. And I want to talk about that for a second. I want you all to know, okay, that a patriot to this country can agree and disagree with President Trump. And whatever you think of me out there, I can assure you that I am a patriot. I love this country. I went from rags to riches because I was given an opportunity and I worked my butt off and I made sacrifices that other people weren't willing to make. And now I'm on the radio and talking to you, and I ran for the United States Senate, and I have more money than I used to. Let's just put it that way. So I'm doing pretty good. So I love this country because only in a country like ours could someone like me, born in that hellhole of Detroit, in one of the worst neighborhoods in the country, with a single mother on welfare and food stamps, surrounded by violence, guns shoved in my mouth, raped as a child for a period of 2 years by a predator, high school dropout because of gun violence in the schools for 4 months my freshman year of high school. Only in America could someone born into those circumstances be talking to you on the radio tonight. So don't ever question my love for this country. I love it so much, I wore the greatest uniform that's ever existed, and that is the uniform of a United States Marine. Okay, and I served 7 years of active duty. I literally gave my back because I got injured in training and had multiple spinal surgeries. And so I literally gave my back for this country that I love so much. And I can agree with President Trump when he does something that I think is great. And I'll be the first one to say it. But I can also disagree with President Trump, and that doesn't make me suffering from Trump derangement syndrome. It doesn't make me un-American to disagree with the president or disagree with other politicians. Listen, this is the world we live in, man. If you give credit to President Trump, like I'm about to on some things, and people hear me give President Trump credit, they're going to call me a MAGA cultist. They're going to call me a Trump bootlicker, a Trump sycophant, right? That's what they're going to call me if I give President Trump any credit. Now, when people hear me disagree with President Trump, you know what they're going to say? He's a rhino. He's a Democrat. He suffers from Trump derangement syndrome because he didn't bow down and agree with every single thing President Trump does. Those are the two extreme camps we live in. And I kind of understood it during the election because the election, there was so much at stake in 2024. And it really was like a binary choice. And you had people who believed that we're headed towards socialism if you vote for Kamala Harris, and we're going to be forced with, socialism and the DEI and all the nonsense, and we've got to be a meritocracy, and if you vote for Trump, it's the meritocracy, and it's capitalism, and it's freedom, and I get it. That was during the election, and I don't blame people for being so passionate during the election that you got to choose one side because there's only two sides. Okay, but the election's over. President Trump won. President Trump won. He's the president of the United States. Now it's about governing, and it's about policies, and it's about what our priorities are as a nation and as a people. And I believe that President Trump has done some great things. We're going to talk about it. All right, we're going to talk about it. And I reject the hyper divisiveness. Listen, I ran for United States Senate against Elizabeth Warren, as you know. And during the election, I went to the border and I learned that 12 million illegal migrants had crossed our southern border in 3.5 years under Joe Biden. And I came back and I said, this is a national security risk. It's a public health risk. 12 million people are walking through. Some of them are terrorists. Like, we know that. Some of them want to do harm to America, and we're just letting them walk through the door. And Elizabeth Warren called me a racist and a xenophobe because I said it was a national security crisis. She goes, oh, there's John Deaton, a Republican, saying that, he's going down the racist and the xenophobia thing. That's ridiculous. It's just math. 12 million people cross the border. If 95% of them are amazing human beings and 5%, only 5% are bad, that's 600,000 bad guys walking through the door of our country. Yet in this divisive world we live, I'm going to get called a racist. And that's the thing we have to reject in this country. We have to reject that kind of divisiveness, okay? Now, I've read the big, beautiful bill that passed by the Senate, and I'll tell you that if I was in the Senate, I would have voted no. And I'm going to explain why. But before you call me a rhino who doesn't support Trump, let me first acknowledge some great things that Donald Trump has done in his first 6 months in office. All right. And this is the segment where people are going to call me a MAGA cultist, and they're going to call me a Trump lover and bootlicker and all these things. But this show is called The Hard Truth. And I'm going to give you the hard truth, whether it's favorable or unfavorable to whoever is in the White House or whoever we're talking about. Number one, and this things I wrote down off the top of my head without doing any research. Number one, border security. Donald Trump, without needing an act of Congress, has reduced illegal crossings in this country by 93%. 93. Remember, Joe Biden said, oh, my hands are tied. There's nothing I can do. I need Congress to act. I can't stop the 12 million people that are coming and flooding the country. I can't do anything about it. I'm helpless as the president of the United States. Well, guess what? Even though Congress should do their job, they didn't. President Trump did. He shut it down 93%. He passed the Laken-Riley Act. That's outstanding, all right? And he deserves an enormous amount of credit because that open border was unsustainable. Second thing President Trump has done that is great, deregulation. He's deregulated the business and the energy sectors in this country. You had ESG, the SEC, trying to force companies to talk about their environmental strategy and how they were going to be carbon, neutral by a certain time. They're not even the EPA, it's the SEC, but it was this massive overregulation by bureaucrats and regulators trying to stifle innovation in American businesses, the hyper-focus on DEI, all of that. President Trump has eliminated that, these overregulations. We need that here in Massachusetts. You have a housing crisis in Massachusetts, yet builders take 2 years to get their permits to build. That's ridiculous. We need less regulation, less red tape. Number three that President Trump has done, NATO. He went to NATO and he forced these other countries, Germany, the United Kingdom, Canada, to start paying a fairer share of the defense of their own countries. President Trump said you got to pay 3% of your gross domestic product, GDP. That's fantastic. Canada and the UK have promised that they're going to increase by $100 billion by 2030 already. That's outstanding. Okay, Joe Biden would have never done that. Barack Obama would have never done that. We got to give credit where credit is due. Another one, number 4, Doge, the creation of Doge with Elon Musk and uncovering some. They didn't get as much as they had hoped, that's for sure, but they uncovered some fraud. They uncovered some waste, like the Sesame Street in Iraq, or all kinds of stuff that were being spent. Some of these NGOs, non-government organizations, it's an activity that the government's not allowed to do, but government funds it. Some of that was going to like politicians, wives or spouses or friends or family. They uncovered some of that. So an agency that's looking how to cut some of the fat, the waste and the fraud out of the government. That's an amazing thing. That deserves credit. We need to continue that. Number 5, school choice. $5 billion went to 500,000 students in 10 states who are allowed vouchers and to go to private school. That's a great thing. Number 6, fentanyl. Labeling the drug cartels as foreign terrorist organizations. 5,000 more DEA agents putting the Mexico government on notice that we're going to hold you responsible if you don't help crack down on the fentanyl and the drugs. That's a great thing. The hard truth is paid for by the Deaton law firm. I've been representing mesothelioma and lung cancer victims for 23 years across the Commonwealth. If you or a loved one have been diagnosed with mesothelioma or lung cancer and were exposed to asbestos, you contact me at the Deaton Law Firm. That's DeatonLawFirm.com. You can also reach me here at this show at thehardtruthshow.com. That's John at hardtruthshow.com. John at hardtruthshow.com. Welcome back to The Hard Truth. You're listening to John Deaton. Contact me, John at hardtruthshow.com. John at hardtruthshow.com. Let me know what you think about the show and the things I'm saying. We're talking about the great things that President Trump has done before I talk about the big, beautiful bill. And school choice was number 5. Expanded school choice, 500,000 students in 10 states. $5 billion enhancing school choice. Great. Number 6, fentanyl. Fentanyl and drug cartels labeled as foreign terrorist organizations, putting the cartel and the Mexico government on notice. The United States is going to hold you responsible. Number 7, that President Trump deserves credit, is making innovation a priority in this country. He appointed David Sachs, the artificial intelligence and crypto czar of America. He established a crypto council in the White House. You have David Sachs in charge and Bo Hines as executive director doing an outstanding job. Said we're going to make Bitcoin and crypto America the capital of the world for that type of innovation and technology. Established a strategic Bitcoin reserve like we talked about earlier. Number 8, reforming the federal agencies on health care and putting Robert RFK Jr. in there and shaking things up. We're now learning that certain dyes that were banned in other countries are being banned in America, making our health better, making our food better, agriculture better. Those are all amazing things that were being neglected in the past. Okay, number 9, the way that President Trump handled Iran. Okay, just like other people, I was worried, I was concerned. What's he going to do? He bombs Iran, and then Iran turns around and tells us they're going to bomb us back, but gives us notice, tells us when they're going to do it, where they're going to do it, and then signs a ceasefire agreement. And he gets Israel and Iran, after bombing Iran, to cease fire. That's outstanding work, outstanding. 10th one off the top of my head that I wrote down, the fact that President Trump has companies building in America again. We've learned that at least $2 trillion by these companies is coming to America, manufacturing here in America. Give you a couple highlights. Apple agreed to spend $500 billion over the next 10 years in America. May have been 5 years. Honda is building more in America. SoftBank said they're going to invest $1 trillion in America. TSM, that's Taiwan Semiconductors, going to expand their Arizona offices and operations. $100 billion invested there. Stellantis, which is a car manufacturer, they're going to build more in America. Nvidia, Honda, all of these companies have come to the table and told President Trump that, yes, we're going to build more stuff in America. We're going to invest more in America. You have to applaud that. And these Democrats, they can't do it. They just can't give credit where credit is due. Okay? So, Ed Markey, Elizabeth Warren, they're never going to say any of what I just said. They're never going to give credit where credit deserves. Okay? We just learned that there may be a ceasefire and peace deal with Gaza. Iran and Israel we just talked about, but it could be if Hamas takes this deal, we could have peace there. Vietnam agreed to no tariffs against America, but Vietnam will pay 20%, tariffs. India deal. President Trump struck a tariff deal with China. Canada backed down. They had put a tariff and a tax on some of our digital economy industries and then turned around after President Trump said, all right, I'm done talking to Canada. I'm suspending all talks with Canada. Canada turned around and did a 180. And now they're like, okay, we'll remove that tax on American businesses. Okay, those are great things. Those are beautiful things. And so let me preface the show and my final comments on that. Because the big, beautiful bill is not beautiful. All right? And the first thing to know is that we have to address the national debt. It is $37 trillion now, people. We spend $2 trillion a year more than we bring in on tax revenue. It's unsustainable. We have to deal with it. We're going off a cliff. America's going bankrupt. Elon Musk is tweeting it every other minute about how America's going to go bankrupt. And President Trump is in office and he wants his stuff done. And so, of course, he doesn't want his hands tied. Let me tell you something, everybody. When you go to Washington, these politicians, they get addicted to something. There's a drug in Washington, D.C. It's stronger than crack. It's stronger than heroin. It is a drug called the printer. It is the money printer. These politicians, they see these trillions of dollars coming in tax revenue, and they just want to spend. And it's easy for them. They'll just say, well, they'll hit the print button, and we'll just print another $5 trillion out of the air, and then we'll just issue debt. That's what we do in this country, and it's not being addressed. And so we have to be honest. President Trump and Elizabeth Warren agree on something. You want to know what that something is? They agree that America should get rid of the debt ceiling that doesn't allow us to go over that debt ceiling unless Congress gets together and they pass a continuing resolution that says, okay, we're going to raise the debt ceiling. Instead of 37 trillion, we're going to raise it to 40 trillion and 50 trillion and 80 trillion and 100 trillion. And so far, you've seen the impact of this money printing. You're seeing it when you go to the grocery store. It's basic economics. The more money you create, the more paper money that you print, the less valuable each dollar becomes. Did you know that the first 200 years of America, we created $1 trillion. $1 trillion in 200 years. Just during COVID, we printed $7 trillion. $7 trillion in 2 years versus $1 trillion in 200 years. We've got to do something about this addiction. And both President Trump and Elizabeth Warren, they want to reduce eliminate the debt ceiling so that whoever is in charge can just spend, print. And we need that debt ceiling to try to keep them honest. We need Senate to do their job. But what they did with the big, beautiful bill is they set a date for President Trump, and then they just rushed to get something done. And when they did that, it's not good. And I fear that this rush to get something done is going to cost the Republicans. I believe it's going to cost them dearly, unless I'm completely wrong and the economy goes through the roof and job creation is through the roof. But let me give you a few highlights. This bill is massive Medicaid cuts, and it doesn't guarantee, but it threatens children being kicked off Medicaid and not having health care. $600 to $800 billion over 10 years is being cut from Medicaid. We have 41% of children born in this country is paid by Medicaid. 41%. If you take 50% of all births in rural areas, then 50% of those births are paid by Medicaid. The CBO, Congressional Budget Office, says that 1 in 5 children could lose. 20% of all children could lose Medicaid coverage. Doesn't mean they will, but they could. Rural hospitals could be put out of business because 7% of their entire spending or payments are made through Medicaid. Okay, SNAP cuts, food stamps, 200 to 300 million in 10 years, the largest cut in food stamps in American history. And they put in these work environments. And listen, I know that this is a soft spot for me. Let me acknowledge that. I was raised with food stamps, and my mom was on welfare. My mom had 4 small children. There was no way she could do child care. She tried her best to work. She worked when she could, but we needed the food stamps and we needed the welfare. And so I certainly have a soft spot, but this is the point. All right. Children will potentially lose health care. Children potentially will lose food stamps. 13% of our population in America already experiences food insecurity. My point here is that we don't start cutting at the poor. We don't. That's not where we start. We have a Department of Defense that has $1 trillion budget per year. They haven't passed an audit in over 10 years. Maybe we could start there. Maybe Doge can get in there and cut some of the waste. Okay, we have tax cuts that are predominantly helping the wealthy. And I'm running out of time on this show, so I'm going to have to talk about it next show because I talked about other things. But let me just put it to you this way. We're going to pick up this conversation next week, but I want you all to go out there. I want you to read the big, beautiful bill and know this. These tax cuts, basically the bottom 20%, anyone making $35,000 or less may get $60 in tax cuts. Maybe, if they pay taxes all, which most don't. Someone making $50,000 to $100,000, they're going to get an average cut of $1,800. That helps. But the top 20% making $200,000 and more, they get 70% of all the tax cuts. They do pay all the taxes, most of them, but they get 70%. And you got to ask yourself, is it worth $3 to $5 trillion in debt? We're going to break down next week this policy, the big, beautiful bill. I want to give you a snapshot. So see you next week. We're going to get into the details, and I'm going to convince you that it's not a good idea.
You're listening to The Hard Truth with John Deaton. John Deaton is a Marine veteran, lawyer, and best-selling author who stared down poverty, survived street violence, and beat cancer to fight another day. From the streets to the courtroom, Deaton has taken on corporate greed and fought against government fraud and overreach. Always for the little guy, a proud father of 3 girls, Deaton brings you the raw, unfiltered truth that hits hard and holds nothing back. Join us as we dive into his journey, his vision, and what he hopes to bring to the people of Massachusetts.